Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome to our very first Natural Super Kids podcast episode of 2026. Happy New Year. I hope you had a beautiful festive season with your family, whether that's here in the Southern Hemisphere where you're enjoying summer or in the Northern Hemisphere where it's probably quite a bit colder. I hope you're, making the most of this time, or you have made the most of the festive season. But now we are well into 2026 and I'm excited to bring you some really juicy podcast topics this year. We've got lots of exciting topics planned for you. We're always open to suggestions as well. So please get in touch if there's a particular subject or topic you want us to cover. But we're starting this year with a bit of a series on eczema and allergies. And in this episode, I want to talk about why so many kids have eczema and allergies these days and what parents can start to think about and do about it, because some of it's out of our control, right? But there are certainly things that we can focus on as parents. So when we look at the stats of eczema and allergies, they're pretty scary. In developed countries, eczema affects up to 30% of children. That's a huge number of children. And I'm sure if you're listening to this episode, you might have that very, direct association. One of your children might have eczema, you might have eczema or allergies. So know that you're not alone. It's a very common issue, as are allergies. So allergies are among the fastest growing chronic conditions here in Australia and much of the developed world. Almost 20% of the Australian population have some sort of an allergic disease, and this prevalence is increasing. In fact, it's thought that by 2050, the incidence of allergies in Australia will increase by 70%, which means 7.7 million Australians will be affected by some sort of allergic condition. And our kids are struggling with these conditions more than anyone else. So it's a really important topic to be talking about. And, as I said, some of it is out of our control as we're going to be talking about, but I really want to focus on some of the things that we can do as parents and some of the things we need to be aware of in terms of, what are some of the things that are leading to these crazy high numbers when it comes to allergies and eczema. It's a systemic pattern, if you like. It's nothing that you're doing that's the problem. I really want parents to know this. And really it comes down to genetics and environment. Both matter. So it is important to acknowledge, I think, that predisposition does play a role in eczema and allergies. Genetic studies have identified many shared risk factors that make someone more likely to develop things like eczema and other allergic disease, asthma, allergies, food allergies, environmental allergies. But genetics alone can't explain the rapid increase over recent generations. Genes just don't change that fast. So let's talk about some of those other environmental factors, the biggest one being the hygiene hypothesis. So one of the most influential theories for rising allergy rates is the hygiene hypothesis. And this was first proposed in 1989. And I do want to say here, I think I've already said it, that allergies and eczema are multifactorial. It's not just one thing that's causing the prevalence to increase so much over recent sort of decades and generations. But the hygiene hypothesis is, as I said, one of the most influential theories. So how this sort of came about, back in 1989, researchers noticed that children in larger families with more exposure to microbes from siblings had lower rates of hay fever and allergic disease. And so what the hygiene hypothesis basically tells us is that a lack of microbial exposure early in life may lead to an immune system that doesn't learn to regulate itself properly. And it tips towards being really sensitive and these allergic responses that so many kids are struggling with these days. And this idea has evolved even more into, other hypotheses such as the old friends hypotheses. And this is a really interesting one. And it sort of really plays into the hygiene hypothesis. But it is slightly different. So let's use the analogy of your child's immune system being a puppy. And if we think about that puppy, for most of history, that puppy has grown up playing in dirt, being around other animals, eating fresh, unprocessed food, and living alongside lots of harmless microbes, whether that's bacteria, fungi, parasites. And these microbes were our old friends. So the microbes trained the immune system, or the puppy, in terms of this analogy, how to stay calm, how to tell the difference between real threats and harmless things, and how to respond appropriately without overreacting. And if we fast forward now to modern life, where we've got these ultra clean homes, we've got antibacterial everything, we've got a lot of processed packaged food in the diet, less outdoor play, more time indoors, more antibiotics. So now the immune system puppy doesn't get enough training. So instead of being calm and well behaved, it overreacts to things like pollens or foods or dust, aka allergies. It also attacks the body rather than, in terms of autoimmune disease, because that all falls into this category as well. So the immune system also can trigger inflammation, which leads to things like eczema, asthma, and gut issues. So in short, without our old friends, those microbes that we used to have so much exposure to, the immune system loses its chill. It doesn't know what to do anymore. It's untrained. And so it's overreacting to things that it really shouldn't react to, such as foods or environmental substances, dust, mold, pollens, grasses, all sorts of things that we can have allergies to. And this links into eczema as well, because a lot of eczema is allergy related as well. And I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you may have a child that has eczema and allergies, or eczema and, can be reactive to certain foods and environmental substances as well. From the work that we do with kids with eczema, there's often triggers that are related to food, and it might not be like a diagnosed allergy, but it might be, an intolerance or a sensitivity, or it can also be environmental triggers when it comes to eczema as well. So it comes back to this immune system puppy not being trained because of its lack of exposure to different microbes, these harmless microbes. And this is much to do with our modern diet and our modern lifestyle and our modern environment. So I'm not saying that we want to be unclean. Unclean and hygienic are sort of two different things. Hygiene, to a point, protects us against serious infection. But our modern ultra-sterile environments don't provide the immune stimulation children historically received through that exposure to different microbes. And I love what Dr. Maya Shatreat says in her book, The Dirt Cure. So she explains many times in her book that our immune systems co-evolved with a wide array of microbes and exposures that taught them how to tolerate everyday triggers. And without that education, the immune system can become, and this is where it can come back to genetics, because it doesn't happen to everyone, but with certain genetic predispositions, it certainly does. The immune system can become hyperreactive, leading to things like allergies and eczema, which is what we're talking about today. The other really important piece of this is microbiome diversity. And I've talked about this a lot on the podcast in all sorts of topics. I talk about microbiome diversity in relation to eczema and allergies, but also in relation to fussy eating and ADHD. So it matters in so many ways, and it especially matters early in life. So microbiome diversity is basically a way of saying that the more diverse, the more variety of healthy, beneficial species of bacteria we have within the gut microbiome, the more our kids are protected against some of these chronic health conditions that we're talking about today, eczema, allergies, and so many more. So factors like C-section births, limited breastfeeding, antibiotic use, overly hygienic environments, processed diets, lack of outdoor microbial exposure, because our kids are spending so much more time inside, all influence the development of a child's microbiome. And a less diverse microbiome is associated with higher rates of allergies, and also eczema, and so many other of the chronic health conditions that we see in kids. And again, it comes back to the fact that the immune system hasn't been properly informed, trained, educated, and it doesn't know what is harmless and what is harmful. So it starts reacting to things that it shouldn't: foods, environmental substances, that sort of thing. So I hope this helps you to see how our modern environments and lifestyles have a part to play when it comes to this, the prevalence of eczema and allergies in our kids. So our modern lifestyle, our modern environment influence the immune system. But what this means is that there is hope. There are things that we can do. There's influences that we can have as parents on the environment that our kids grow up in, particularly our home environment. We can control, what food we have that our kids can access. And we can control we can control things like the cleaning products and personal care products that we use in our home, because they can have an impact on things like microbiome diversity as well. So we can start to think about, as parents, how can we regulate our kids' immune system from within? And there's certainly so many things that we have in our naturopathic tool belt, different strategies, different remedies that can support that immune regulation. When we have that vision of like, okay, my child's immune system is overreactive, how can we settle down that immune system? And this is what we're going to be talking about over the coming weeks here on the podcast. So we want to really focus on that immune regulation. And just to tie in what we were just talking about, the gut microbiome, when we support gut microbiome diversity, that's one of the best things we can actually do to support healthy immune regulation as well. As I say often, a lot of this stuff comes back to the gut and the gut microbiome. We've got tools as naturopaths to build tolerance. So rather than just think about, okay, my child's got allergies to this, this, and this, we need to remove them from their diet or remove them from their environment. Yes, that is part of the picture, particularly, if your child has a serious allergy, if they're anaphylactic to a certain food, we definitely don't want to be exposing them to that food. But how can we build up their tolerance over time so that they don't get further allergies, so that their skin's not so sensitive? So again, supporting gut microbiome diversity plays a big part in building that tolerance over time. There's also certain herbal remedies and things that can build that immune tolerance over time as well. And when we're talking about removing foods from the diet, which is so often what we're talking about when we are discussing things like eczema and allergies, yes, sometimes it's necessary to remove certain foods that are triggering our kids' eczema or that our kids are allergic to. But what can we add into the diet that's going to be really nourishing, that's going to be supporting resilience, supporting the immune system, supporting a healthy gut microbiome, supporting that healthy gut microbiome diversity, I should say. So I want to help you see that it's not just about what we take out. What can we add in that's going to really support our children? And of course, as always, I'm going to really try and share this information in family-friendly strategies that fit into busy family life. I know you don't have hours and hours to spare to work this out. And so I want to make sure that the information that I'm sharing is practical, it's realistic. And this episode really is about having that mindset shift of, what can we do? Although these factors are somewhat out of our control in terms of the wider environment and our Western lifestyle and diet, there is still so much that we can control as parents. And I also don't want you thinking, oh, well, my child's already got the allergy, so, it's too late. It's never too late. And we know that, kids with allergies can develop further allergies later on in their life. So if we want to reduce the future allergies popping up, the best thing that we can do is to focus on gut microbiome diversity, immune regulation, building tolerance with some of these strategies that I'm going to be talking about over the next few weeks. So I want you to remember that your child's eczema or their allergies didn't happen because you did something wrong. They're a symptom of how modern lives are interacting with developing immune systems. But the hopeful part is there is more that can be done than just slapping on a steroid cream or avoiding that food that your child is allergic to. And when it comes to environmental allergies, it's almost impossible to avoid exposure to pollens or grasses or dust. So it becomes even trickier to manage with kids with environmental allergies in terms of that avoidance part. So what we can do naturopathically is we can support resilience from the inside out. And that's what we're going to be exploring together in future episodes. And I also have an exciting masterclass coming up very soon that's going to be completely free as well. But more on that over the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.